Hello everyone. Let's start this session together. No matter where you are, how busy you are, this moment can one put aside all the things that keep occupying the mind. Life is full of crises. There are endless issues, troubles, chaos, sufferings. And the brain is so easy to escape through various pleasurable things, ideas, fantasies. And those escapes become an umbrella under which one isolates oneself. From the actual situation, the authentic living. And nothing is resolved. Any escape does not lead to any issues dissolved. Therefore, it is very important and also very urgent for one to realize this deeply, actually. That's to inquire into all the issues by finding out the right approach. Probably one of the most challenging things for human beings is to observe oneself properly, adequately, and objectively. Without knowing how to observe, how to approach oneself, escapes become normal, justified, and worshipped by almost everybody. And in those endless escapes perpetuated by entertainment, and various pleasure-seeking activities, the world becomes more chaotic, full of contradiction and conflicts. Environmentally, the earth is becoming deteriorated deteriorated. The earth is becoming deteriorated. Socially, people become more and more self-centered, individual, and isolated. Communication becomes utterly difficult. Even this superficial chat is becoming more and more demanding. And in the whole world, there are endless wars between nations, between peoples, races. In the name of self-preservation, or religion, or faith, or whatever. At the same time, various human disasters are also taking place. So those escapes make the mind ignorant. And that's why it is important, at least the speaker feels so, to deal with various escapes and find the right way to observe everything properly. When there are no issues, when all the issues are dissolved, the mind may find that it is totally unnecessary to escape. But when there are issues, and the mind is confused and don't know how to deal with these issues properly, the mind feels or has a stronger tendency to escape. Please be kindly aware of this. When there are no issues, and all the issues are dissolved, escape is not something the mind feel interested in. But when there are issues, and the mind cannot find out how to deal with these issues, escape becomes normal. Can one observe this in oneself? We are not talking about anything theoretical. This is something actual taking place in each of us. How can one approach oneself? Can one do that through analysis, through various practices? Or through various theories? Or through the guidance from someone else? All those things are very easy to take place, right? As one who is serious and earnest sees the whole world. The mind tends to depend on an authority to guide oneself. The authority may be a religious practice, or faith, or some philosophical ideas, or psychological theories. Or some books, or some gurus. The authorities also can be the self-centered personal experiences. The mind believes in one's own thoughts, which is still the form of self-worship. Obviously, at least to the speaker, I hope this also is to everybody. When the mind has some authorities to depend on, the mind cannot observe oneself. The very dependence on anything external is preventing oneself from approaching oneself. And thoughts are external. What is your reaction to this statement? Do you feel this statement is strange? shocking and unbelievable. But that statement states the fact. Thoughts are external. Can one feel the fact as fact? When one can do that, it's finished. But one cannot. Can one investigate and find out why can one not? One may hear from the speaker that this statement, thoughts are external, is a fact. But why cannot one feel that this is a fact? What has happened and what is happening to the mind? That it is disconnected from this fact. When one cannot feel this statement is a fact, therefore this statement is no longer relevant to one. And one carries on one's own living. Perhaps also making some absurd judgment on this statement. That's what most people are doing. They believe in their own experience. They feel that, okay, this statement is not factual. They don't feel that it is factual. Therefore, they believe that experience and stop inquiring further. It is only possible for one to inquire when one does not believe in one's own experience. And when one hears this statement, one won't agree or disagree. One will inquire, observe, to find out whether it is true or not. And hopefully you are also doing that now. why do I, or why have I internalized thoughts? Therefore, I no longer feel that thoughts are external. What is happening to the mind when thoughts have been internalized and is being internalized? This whole world and civilization is worshipping thoughts. I depend on thoughts to create my identity. My existence is based on thoughts. My ownership and possessiveness is also thought process. My success, achievement, stories, my fame, prestige are all thoughts. I depend on my neighbors' reviews, opinions, judgment. I live according to that, which is also a thought process. I love my nation. I'm proud to be this, that, various identities, which are all thoughts. Obviously, human beings have attached great importance to thoughts in various ways. Is that factor that mind internalized thoughts? All those importance attached to thoughts bring about self-importance, doesn't it? In other words, is self-importance and thoughts being internalized the same process? please observe yourself. Let's repeat that. It's self-importance and the thoughts being internalized, the same process. That's to say, as long as I have self-importance, I cannot feel that thoughts are external. As long as I have self-importance, I have vanity. I must be hypocritic deeply. I must be pretentious deeply. Therefore, I cannot see myself as it is. Is that the key factor that prevents one from seeing oneself actually? In other words, observing oneself objectively. When I attempt to do that through theories, ideas, views, or the guidance of other people, in other words, still through verse and thoughts, some theories can be very satisfying. But still, those verse and the explanations are catering to the self-importance. Because the mind feels that verse and thoughts are internalized. The mind therefore naturally depends on verse and thoughts to observe oneself, which is a note, because it's still in the chaos of thoughts, blocking myself from observing myself actually. So can the mind see the fact as fact? Thoughts are external. That's to say, can the mind be free from all the self-importance? As we have discovered today, self-importance is a key factor that distorts the actual. The mind, which is trapped in a self-importance, that always cling to some ideas, pleasurable explanations. But it simply stays put. When the mind perceives this deeply, there must be action from the mind to put aside the self-importance. Without any self-importance, there's no distortion. Therefore, the mind observes oneself as it is. The mind is actually doing that. It is capable of discovering the real issue. When one is able to observe everything without any distortion, one has embarked on a journey of discovery. Not trapped by the issues defined by the thoughts. The mind is capable of finding the real issue. In seeing the real issue, which is insight, there's immediate change. All those demands one's diligence to observe, putting aside the self-importance, and seeing everything precisely as it is. In doing so, the mind knows how to observe oneself, how to approach oneself. So now, let's keep silent for 5 minutes together to savor what we have discussed and discovered today. Then after that, we'll come back to the session for a short period of Q&A. Let's do it now. So let's come back to the session.
There is a question in the comment.
Okay.
The content is, the mind is restless, difficult to control. Can meditation restrain the mind?
Why does one want to control the mind? Why the mind have the idea of restraint of something? Obviously, various symptoms and the phenomenon of the mind and the brain can be easily observed. Seeing all these phenomena and the symptoms, the mind simply form an image about this. And the idea to dissolve, clearing, to dissolve, the mind is still ambitious, isn't it? It is ambitious to dissolve its issues according to the experience of one's own symptoms. Therefore, the mind craves a method or practice from anybody the mind thinks can give. All those is a thought process. Seeing the mind is restless. Can the mind not thinking about doing something about it? When the mind keeps thinking about doing something about the symptom, or whatever it is, the mind does not stay with what is. Because the purpose of clearing that symptom matters more than others. Can I observe this in myself? The same pattern. Always want to do something about something. Perhaps it is one of the factors that lead to the mind to be restless. Always want to do something about something. Therefore, it's a loop. The mind keeps doing something about something. Therefore, the mind keeps being restless. And seeing the problem of being restless, the mind still won't do something about it. Is that a loop the mind is stuck in? To deal with the state of being restless is not to do something about it. Then the mind just fell trapped to various practices, system of thoughts, religions, and all that nonsense. But rather kind of mind, not doing something about something. Rather, to observe, find out, the root cause of being restless. As we said in the first part of today's session, one must find out the right approach to observe itself. Obviously, thoughts are not the right approach, because the mind internalizes thoughts. And using thoughts as the only tool to observe everything, which is not observing, because thoughts, being as the filter, distorts everything. Doing something about something is still the activity of thoughts. Therefore, the mind keeps being pushed and spurred by thoughts. Perhaps that's one of the factors leading to the mind to be restless. So can the mind observe all those things as they are, without any distortion. Which perhaps can bring about a deep understanding, which is beyond any imagination now. What the mind needs is great and deep understanding of all those phenomena and symptoms. Not stuck in the pattern of doing something about something all the time. So can one observe perhaps that resistance is related to the restlessness in every big way. I think that's enough for this question, right? Hopefully, this friend or whoever asked this question could get some insight from this interaction.
So eventually, it is the
not premeditated. Without it's come out without any pre-knowledge.
And Cico, how do you see the possibility that when there arises the total, full, true attention and observation, all the illusions and the thoughts can be quiet in a sudden moment? How do you see this possibility. When there is total full attention, which is also observation, and the mind, all the restless thoughts can come to an end suddenly.
I won't say that way because it will bring a sense of hope, or try to luring the people to do that.
Could that be a sheer act?
Full attention is sheer acting, but it's very tricky to describe that. You say, oh yeah, in full attention, everything comes stop. Then that image become another purpose. Okay, I want to do full attention because full attention can make the thought stop. Then one cannot be fully attentive because that direction prevents the mind.
So be careful of this tricky side.
We can say that, but anybody who listens to this statement must be very cautious because any image which becomes a purpose or direction prevents one from being attentive. Even this sentence, this statement, which point to the truth, but still one must be able to receive the message cautiously, which still demands one's attention. So that's why that's one of the issues of language. It has a lot of potential triggers. But we can still use language, which demands attention from everybody. So we can use the language, the expression to point to something. But everybody must be able to go beyond the verse to see the point.
May I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
In today's session, you mentioned the dependence on thought. So the question is, what's the relationship between the dependence on thought and the awakening of intelligence? So one can see that the dependence on thought hinders the awakening of intelligence. But in communication, thought has to be used to deliver the message.
You are right, but thoughts are not dependent. Thoughts are not dependent to use. Thoughts have to be used in the right way. But when we say the right way, means that the mind is not dependent on thoughts, but can still use thoughts. When you say that what's the question? The relationship between the dependence on thoughts and
the awakening of intelligence.
There's no relationships. When the mind is dependent on thoughts, it's trapped, isolated, deceived, and conditioned. And therefore, the intelligence of the neuron system is suppressed, distorted. But when the mind does not depend on thoughts, which demands diligent observation, care, then we can still use the language, thoughts, to point to something. But that something must be perceived directly by one. But when the mind depends on thoughts, that perception of something the thoughts point to is no longer perceived. Do you see the point here? Maybe I can rephrase it indefinitely. So when the mind depends on thoughts, the mind is trapped. But when we use thoughts which is carried on by verse, in the right way, means that the mind has no dependence on thoughts, which is full awareness, caution, alert. Then one can see the things that words are pointing to. So thoughts will function properly in the right place, but there's no dependence on thoughts. When the mind seeing the thing the words are pointing to, it's finished.
So seeing is acting.
Seeing is acting. And in this whole process, thoughts, language will function properly in its right place. But there's no dependence on thoughts and words. Which is real discipline. Which is a real discipline everyone must have. Otherwise, communication is not possible. Because any words, any thoughts become something to depend on. It kills, destroys the communication. So that's why the real communication is never bi-directional. It's from both sides to give full attention, not to be trapped by any words or thoughts. So we can use the language to point to something and see the thing together.
Why sometimes people listen to the truth, the words pointing to the truth again and again, but the mind is still caught in the thoughts?
So
there is no real acting inside.
So that's why one must be very cautious. Because the mind can be so subtly dependent on words. So even when those words are pointing to something true, but these words can be still lingering. One must be aware of this and root out any possibility of dependence on words. And it is only possible when one is acting. I think one must come to the moment that one has to dive, to act. If that is not done, then thoughts must be still dominating.
True.
So to end all those psychological dependence, which is also manifested in the entanglement with words, thoughts, ideas, there must be sheer action. And this sheer action must come from when the mind sees the point. Without translating the point into an idea. Then seeing the point, which is the activity of the neuron intelligence. That initialized the real action and let it happen. It's the thoughts that prevent it from happening, right?
Okay, no more questions.
All right. I think no more question, right, Joyce?
Yes.
I think that's enough for today's session. And this session's playback is available on YouTube. And if anybody would like to support this initiative, one can donate through the Inside Timer. and all the donations will be used by Mindiverse Foundation to take care of this pureness and truth it has embodied. All right, that's it. Take care, and hopefully we can meet again in the future sessions.